Thanks for joining today's session on the API days in the platform engineering track. Um, I'm going to talk about hybrid on-prem plus cloud architectures. Given it's a platform engineering topic, the considerations that I'm going to kind of focus a lot on is going to be basically on costs. Uh, how does kind of security aspects look like? What are the kind of challenges when it comes to the data aspects of these architectural approaches? And obviously, the last one, but the most important in uh, from a governance standpoint. um, yeah, and so we're going to discuss on-premise and cloud, and let's see how that kind of can probably bring a little bit of I would say mind-opening aspects of from my prior experiences of having done this. So a quick introduction about me, just like a brief overview of my experience over last 16 years, so roughly 1.5 decades. So I've been a serial entrepreneur, founder, CTO, having built three different companies, mostly in AI ML, across three different geographies in Southeast Asia, from India, Hong Kong, Singapore. And I also kind of share and talk a lot about um, digital assets, Bitcoin, and Gen AI globally. I also angel invest in mostly these two sectors, and dev tools for three sectors. I have a portfolio of 42 plus startups, mostly in the US. I have some skin in the game in kind of some of these technologies when I kind of really share from my uh, future predictions of what might happen in certain technologies. I also go and invest in those startups. My areas of interest are mostly, as of today, are agentic AI, quantum safety, and digital assets. And I'm Bitcoin class of 2013. So yeah, I'm going to give a flavor of this hybrid on-prem cloud architectures from the perspective of uh, Gen AI and agentic AI as well, just so that it kind of comes out in the context of the current environment that we are in. Yeah, and I lead technology engineering for the global innovation um, group in Julius Baer. Julius Baer is a Swiss private bank where I currently work and focus my time on working some of these technologies at the intersection of wealth management. Quick disclaimer before we go forward: the views and some of the opinions that I share are completely of my own, not representative of my organization, Julius Baer, or any other company referred for illustration purposes or mentioned during the discourse, just to kind of share certain aspects. So it's kind of not representative of any of those companies. The agenda is going to be as follows. So um, we'll cover how architectural approaches in terms of infra from a hybrid and cloud. Why does it matter that what business you are in? So there's no one single prescription of a pill that this is the way to kind of use a combination of hybrid architectures or like hybrid infra platforms, but it really depends on what business and what margins your business makes. So it's kind of a little bit backwards in terms of working this out. I'll touch upon that a little bit as well. Yeah, and why choose hybrid is equally kind of an important question. Like, is it like a strategic way of doing things, or is it like really a BAU um, uh, situation where you land into because eventually your organization was either in cloud or on premise, and then you eventually landed onto the other one based on some new requirements in the industry that you have. So we'll briefly cover the TCO mindset, the total cost of ownership, which is a very big driver of um, how these architectures are kind of explored and chosen, and also simultaneously looking at security aspects and benefits of trusted execution environment. So I myself come from a mission oriented industry like finance and wealth management. So based on my current role, so it's important to kind of highlight how mission oriented industries like medicine, hospitals, medical research, or for that matter, finance, wealth management, or when it comes to government organizations. These are all mission-oriented businesses, uh, which basically have these extra requirements of uh, mission critical industries having extra requirements of governance and data regulatory challenges, and that's where some of this hybrid requirement actually comes through. And finally, some examples to kind of give you a flavor of what really happens in the industry today, and some of the context and background of this. So before we go forward, I think it was very apt to also ask this question, like it really depends how long you've been in the industry. So what is on premise, physical racks and servers, or data centers? So a quick show of hands, like of people who've actually assembled their own personal desktops before the laptop era, or maybe have dissected a laptop and actually opened one to see the various components of a computer. If you've really done one, like I have done in my childhood days, like assembling a desktop, uh, you actually can believe and feel that assembling a physical rack server, which is basically your on-premise computer or a server, is also a no-brainer and not that complicated. This is how something, when you use the word on-premise, looks like. And it's basically a big large computer sitting on your own physical real estate, managed by a couple of infra engineers that actually ensure that this private cloud of yours is running. This is how traditionally the world ran before the cloud came in. So it's just like fun to kind of see, if you've not been to one of these data centers or have never actually looked at what an on-premise is. So a quick question and a quick interesting teaser, like for real. I mean, people always ask me, are you for real, like real, like the whole world is cloud and you're talking about on-premise? What's the kind of real need for it? So let me just ask you a question, like imagine if we could actually move data on a truck container, like literally physical big hard disk the size of a container that you see on this truck, actually being used to move data between point A and point B. Like it sounds ridiculous, isn't it? Like we live in 2025. Who does that? You could actually just do it over the internet. And this is like a rhetorical question, because honestly, uh, it's sort of an analogy that why would you do on premise when like it's so outdated, like moving data on a truck is so outdated. But let me kind of give you an important uh, insight here, if you've not come across this. And it's like Amazon having this is an actual truck. It's called an Amazon snowmobile. It's a truck hauling for a huge hard drive. It's actually cost effective, time effective to move humongous amount of exabyte of data, instead of doing it over the internet. So solutions like these, like kind of out of the out of your imagination, can actually be a viable, feasible alternate to actually move data. So my point only to get you across is like, don't be closed minded if you've been too much in the cloud space. Equally give a chance for on premise, and try and understand in this presentation why on premise could really be a strong rank holder as an alternate to cloud, and we'll shortly cover why that is. So I hope I'm able to. So this service got retired in 2024. Again, so this is a little pinch of salt, but I know Microsoft Azure still has a similar kind of service and probably different size and proportion. But yeah, I think Amazon might bring another capability similar to this one in future as well. Um, so that's a little bit on why I still kind of stuck around on premise. But there's another one, like Mark Benioff is a very famous entrepreneur, founder, CEO of Salesforce. It's like one of the most biggest successful commercial success stories of the cloud. So he actually hired, like a fun fact, hired a bunch of paid actors to protest outside Siebel conference. So Siebel is the CRM that used to be kind of deployed on premise back in the day, almost in the year 2000, 2001 and 2. And this is him along with some bunch of paid actors actually protesting, and they had to actually call the police to shoo them off the venue. So he was really protesting, like, let's go cloud and let's go do away with this whole on-premise. So it's a cycle, if I kind of really highlight to you. But the reason why uh, I'm bringing this up is because um, from an efficiency standpoint, cloud has proven itself to be really amazing when it comes to going very fast and building fast and actually realizing the efficiencies in terms of revenue per employee. So in fact, Salesforce number during the 2000 uh, transition from on-prem actually took the towards the cloud, actually took the uh, uh, revenue per employee almost 5 times, from 50K per FTE to 250K per FTE. But this is just revenue. I'm not talking about costs here. So that's just like a little Kool-Aid. Like, don't take this too far to kind of really believe that it's just revenue efficiency. Costs also balloon up in cloud. So that's where I think David Heinemar, if some of you know him, like 37 Signals, Basecamp, a very famous startup. He's also like a very big personality and a founder of the Ruby on Rails, uh, like creator of Ruby on Rails framework. If you program in Ruby, the the first go-to framework is actually built by this guy, and he's like a founder as well of a very famous startup, 37 Signals, like big thought leader. And interestingly enough, if you look at the date of this uh, snapshot of his blog in 2023, he actually said he's leaving the cloud. And this is where I really want to kind of start off from a cloud versus an on-premise kind of tug of war, and then eventually land up into the discussion. Maybe hybrid is an interesting strategy to go forward. But do look out for his blog. Why they kind of, this is him showing his picture of the shipped servers that is actually ordered to run 37 Signals away from cloud, just because he had the luxury of using containerized workloads, and he could seamlessly shift it over within 6 months time period. That's amazing. So um, why did he do so? Like, probably we'll try to nuance a little bit today. So this is the mix of the revenue versus the cost aspect. So like, if you really look at cost programs in 2025, they look very directionless, but in 2015 they were revolutionary, because um, a lot of people had just started adopting cloud, and any optimization on the cloud would help. But nowadays, if you kind of just go full scale, uh, running in an enterprise business that has a proven use case of a certain software, then typically clouds can be 5x more expensive. So they do give you 5x revenue in terms of FTE, but they also levelize the costs in that same parity. So effectively, your profits really don't really help. So that's where I think on-premise servers become really interesting. But let's also kind of be mindful of setting the context and what business you're in and what is your margin. I mean, that defines a lot. So both are Teslas in front of you. A prototype for a toy, a wooden Tesla built by a father for his son, is on the extreme right that you see. And you have a proper real Cybertruck built by Elon Musk. So effectively, if your customer is looking for a full enterprise edition, the kind of materials, the kind of platform chassis and stuff like that used is more real world for a real Cybertruck. But if you're like really trying to prove the form factor of how a Cybertruck could potentially look like in terms of design, a 0 to 1 prototype to validate certain, like, you need to be a little cautious of what kind of nature of infra platform would work best for you. So it's important to kind of identify and accept what are you looking for, and then kind of go in. So this actually brings me to this whole idea of cost of ownership, and how to define yours. Depending on your strategy, I mean, the three dirty trade secrets of software engineering is that closed source licensing balloons up your costs, also creates a hindrance around the kind of people you can hire, because some of this technology they've never played with. It creates an entry barrier for a lot of new people. Hiring, upskilling, and training is always a two new problem every 2 years. And how can some of this comparison between on-premise and cloud actually help here? Is I'm going to briefly talk about that. And then obviously you land up into this whole challenge of legacy legacy software every 2 3 years, and you need to upgrade it. And then what platform you are in actually defines. Sometimes you don't want the automatic updates. That's not like your need, because the business, the infra just works fine, and you don't want to kind of go into the next version of another upgrade, and the cost of upgrading as well. So cloud by design forces you to automatically upgrade a lot of times. It does give you a little bit of time, but over a long enough horizon, it does force you to kind of keep updating and redoing your underlying infra. On premise is a little bit cooler in that sense. Like, you bought the infra as a capex amortized over like few years, so it's actually just maintaining and running the same application. Depends on your needs, but typically a lot of cloud players would kind of draw up this graph and kind of show on premise on the wrong kind of limelight, in terms of saying on premise is a lot more expensive. But like you kind of already saw, like the founder of 37 signals highlight this already, that for him the savings are of the order of millions of dollars by just running their own servers now. So in 2023 he was able to achieve that value on the cost program side, and that's why I would always kind of be a little allergic to just kind of believing what some of the cloud providers stitch up these images of cost of ownership. But I think what really it brings up is a great breakup of what the cost of ownerships could look like, the total cost of ownership could look like. And I think software licensing, customization, hardware, IT personal maintenance are some of the breakups on the on-premise side versus on the cloud. It's purely subscription, and then uh, really extracting value from what has been provided. So they, you would see like them trying to say that 77% is less, but like you really looked at what um, David from 37 Singles said, he's actually saving money on the on-premise side. So just don't go for the narrative. Um, Try and actually do this for yourself. And I think I want to highlight a very important part, like the ability to use open source actually reduces a lot of cost. So if you primarily stick to the open source stack with an on-premise combination, if you really have some good fundamental foundational engineers, infra engineers, with a lot of infrastructure as code and containerization workloads, it's relatively much easy to manage and run your own infra. Especially depends if you're in the business of actually offering some infrastructure as a service, or a platform as a service, or a SaaS as a service capability, rather than trying to scale on just the cloud. You could actually just do it over on prem. But yeah, so effectively there are four strategies to kind of do this when you talk about hybrid. So hybrid is basically you do both. Not that you kind of want to do both strategically, but more like you land up into doing both, because your journey as a Swiss private bank, or as a medical research organization started by having your own on-premise servers all along, because privacy was a big important feature, where you did not want this critical information and data for your end clients and customers to land up in the cloud, and you kind of consciously took secrecy or privacy as a very important part of your build, and hence you had on premise. And then now you want to kind of leverage upon some of the capabilities of the cloud, and then you've naturally extended yourself to have cloud. So your hybrid approach is to do a public private cloud in combination with on premise. And then polycloud is like me trying to run three different cloud providers, and like for example, out of the four big techs that we know, which is Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Oracle, you eventually decide to pick the three or two with the most dominant features that are respected in the industry for each of the players. That's polycloud. And then multi-cloud is basically a hybrid cloud strategy. So I still use three, but I don't use them in silos. I actually deploy my workloads seamlessly using a common abstraction between all the three clouds, and then actually deploy my workloads without me knowing which cloud did it go to. So there is no vendor lock-in in multi-cloud. There is no kind of holding me hostage to one particular cloud by one player. I can actually take advantage of pricing differential between three cloud providers, have redundancy and backup in the three cloud providers because I'm actually doing a multi-cloud one. So, and then shared data cloud is more like a SaaS platforms. So if you really use SaaS applications only and then you just kind of stitch them in, then effectively you are doing shared data cloud, which is multi-tenancy, the old world of being on a single cloud provider. So these are the four options that you have that kind of, but the important points that I've mentioned here, from upgrading, scaling, complexity, time to start, like cloud is really easy to start. So if you're starting a new company with a new product idea and you're validating the business case, there's no point in setting up on premise, unless it's like a very, very high ask on the privacy side. So you would then probably try and play with on premise, but otherwise, it, it makes you really fast to set up on the cloud. So the time to start is much lower, the activation energy is much lower, and so there are some of the considerations I've written from hiring, upskilling, control and capability, shared responsibility. These are the kind of challenges or dimensions you would actually pick up, like latency if it's important if you're building a hedge fund, and for you it's important to co-locate to actually the exchanges, and then you're placing trades at a very high frequency. Then choosing cloud is probably stupid, because on premise will reduce your latency, and co-locating with the exchange directly onto their real estate and infra, uh, just like 2 floors above or below, would be a lot more easier. That's the kind of capability some of the exchanges, modern exchanges, provide you as well. So you don't want to do cloud because the round tripping time of placing an order or executing or calculating, and the round trip, actually you lose few seconds in the cloud, while the you miss the kind of price point that you wanted to use to place a high voluminous trade, the order of millions of dollars. So again, that's where I really come back to, like, what kind of business you're in, you gotta think about, and these are the kind of dimensions you should be able to use. If you're like a gaming company or a consumer company, um, or a Netflix like Play, where actually you have bursting workloads over a weekend or a game, or a game of baseball or soccer, and you end up having like bursts of workloads, then I think cloud is your way to kind of be able to fix that unanticipated traffic that can actually. But if you have like a predictable traffic without bursts, then on premise looks like a much better strategy. So typically, if you think of hybrid and cloud, this is the best way to explain this. Like, on the extreme left you have on premises, where you actually have entire control of what you're doing and working, versus on the extreme right you have SaaS, which is completely managed for you. In between you have IaaS, which is infrastructure as service, and PaaS, platform as a service, which is more like a hybrid combination of user and provider managed. So typically cloud platforms give you this IaaS and PaaS capability, and it really depends how you kind of distribute your workloads, using what service or underlying capability of infra managed by you or the provider, or probably in a hybrid way. So what is the hybrid on-prem cloud architecture, right? So if you really kind of see from a cloud standpoint, you do get this hybrid IaaS or PaaS capability to be able to do this. So if you really see some examples from an AWS, so that it's a little bit relatable to you. So Amazon EC2, you're already sort of doing hybrid in that sense, because you have some user responsibilities, or as a developer, or as an infra team, you have responsibilities of managing this. So customer responsibilities in blue. So you might actually question yourself, like, the last two is what AWS is giving me, and if I run most of my workloads on EC2, I shouldn't shy away from actually doing on-prem. So that's my point of trying to get you to this understanding, that if you could just manage these two more capabilities by actually installing a physical hardware on your on-prem, then you're good to go. If you have like EC2 workloads or Kubernetes as well, like, it's much simpler in 2025 today. It will kind of be able to do this. But if you're like really hooked on to more native services which are very well managed by AWS, then it's questionable why would you want to even go into the complexities of on-prem, and it's probably best you stuck to cloud. Again, depends on the application, depends on the business, depends on the needs, but it that's the kind of governing principle. So effectively, if you really start thinking in terms of these five building components of any computer server, or any kind of cloud is basically compute, storage, software, servers, and networking. And it all boils down to this five components. Even in your desktop, if you assemble, like I said, with your own hands, you would be assembling these five components only in the hardware, and likewise for a non-premise server. So there's a, I mean, this is not rocket science anymore. Like the kind of abstractions and the capabilities of packaging that you have today allows you to actually make this very easy to. I mean, like, I know folks and friends who also just sort of as a hobbyist would host their own one of the racks and servers in their own house, uh, because they want to do some AI workloads today and they don't want to be charged on a subscription basis using a cloud, and they want to train their own models, and then they need dedicated GPU. So they would use actually install an on-premise um, high computing cluster in combination with a GPU like an NVIDIA, and then actually start training their own models at home as a hobbyist. So we've come to that part of stage of maturity of this on-premise capabilities that a person who's fairly technical at home can install one. So it's not, as long as you have some cooling aircon facilities that can take care of the heating challenges. But yeah, so a simplest example that I see, like uh, uh, where organizations who've been on like on premise all along and recently kind of migrated onto cloud end up using like this hybrid combination, and they typically start with Entra ID, which is the next evolved version of ADFS, if you know, and your email client Office 365 if you've been on Microsoft services. So then you actually start combining your data storage on premise, and you kind of use the cloud services to kind of run on Microsoft Azure. So this is one example where, like, the easiest hybrid example that I can tell you, where the logins are governed and the emails are governed and stored in on premise, but your Entra ID is like available in Microsoft Azure, and that gets up used to kind of use role based access control for your organizations. uh, the second one is more like you're already hooked on to on-premise SharePoint, Active Directory. So and now you want to kind of use a Dropbox, or for that matter some of the cloud offerings or SaaS providers, or for that matter an open uh, AI API for your LLMs or your agentic AIs, and you actually start using a whitelisted API embedded, or rather opened up with firewall into your on-premise, and then actually you encrypt and decrypt data before you send it onto the cloud. So this is another way where I think lately organizations who had on-premise and are now kind of moving on to cloud have started using in this hybrid model. So these are very primitive small examples, but I hope you get the point. Like, it's possible, people are doing it already, um, but we're still not there where like exabytes of data can be seamlessly moved without the costs of latencies, the costs of inefficiencies over the internet and bandwidth issues. So you got to be mindful as well, like how do you want to do. So hybrid matters even more in the age of agentic AI. So this is my that flavor of background of having built some AI companies, and why I believe on-prem is coming back a lot more. um, like your data residency and sovereignty, you have a lot more control over your own infra. The latency can be much better. Cost optimization wise, you've just bought the infra and you've kind of amortized that over the 5 years, so you're not paying for any high subscription fees. You're more mindful, especially in an evolving field like agentic AI, that how much infra really do you need, or are you overdoing your infra in cloud just because you let loose some kind of a training program to generate your own model for the excitement of it, whereas effectively you end up using only foundational models and you don't use your own models, but you paid for all those extra models just out of curiosity. So these can be really expensive when it comes on the side of AI. Yeah, AI generally costs like luxury. Like, I generally joke around like it's the AI is like Gucci Gabbana of software engineering in terms of costs. So be a little mindful of that. And then uh, if you're really looking for trusted execution environment, especially when you're doing PII data or in the wake of GDPR or regulations like that, where privacy is important and You don't want some data to go out. Like for Swiss banks, privacy is like a feature that they sell for clients because that's what is expected. You don't want to be kind of doing uh, too much on the uh, cloud unless you really have some good complexities on the cybersecurity side. So, mission critical industries, what I initially mentioned at the start of this discussion, was like where these industries it becomes a good logical choice to do on premise as well. So, if you look at the whole agentic AI workbench, like from data engineering stack, data analytics stack, data science stack, and like data visualization stack, you have quite a bit of tools today that are available in the cloud. So again, it really depends, like you want to spend time recreating some of this with open source alternate platforms, or do you want to just plug in to validate your use case? So it really depends on the journey and the stage your company is, and what's the kind of mandate that's been given to the technical team. So underlying capabilities like Terraform, Ansible, Kubernetes, and Docker, if you're actually following this paradigm of packaging your software, then most likely you don't have a problem deploying either to the cloud or your on-premise infra. So that's an important consideration. If you're not on Terraform and Kubernetes and Docker and Ansible, your ability to switch in and switch out between on-premise and hybrid is very, very complicated and difficult because you've kind of not followed the modern DevOps way of deploying and packaging and containerizing and then shifting your workload to any underlying infra. So that's the key message here. Like focus on infrastructure as code, Kubernetes, containerized workloads, Ansible, which is more like automation for your deployments and doing a lot more fancy stuff, and then Dockerization, like the fundamental unit of packaging up software. So it's this is like a key requisite to be able to do this. So one good reference architecture here is like the circled portions or the oval portion and the circle portion is what you could focus on prem, but you could like you really use the MLOps Work Studio machine learning service in Azure to be able to actually build a model, because the kind of evaluation model tools and packaging that they offer natively is much better. So uh, and you don't know how much GPUs you'll have to buy depending on the model that you're building. So you could be dynamically increasing the use of more GPUs, which is much easier to scale without going to a physical hardware purchase, and that's why I refer to the cloud. But effectively, once you've built the model, inferencing and running the model is generally predictable in terms of the size of the infra that you need, and hence you could carry out the rest of the pieces circled here on-prem. So this is like a cloud plus on-prem hybrid as part of the life cycle of developing an agentic AI use case. And I think this is going to be like so this is something we see a lot of banks doing these days. I wouldn't be able to share the specifics of which banks, but a lot of banks kind of are working on this model of running inferencing on-prem because the costs are very, very predictable. And almost is technically free if you count away the capex. So your opex is operationally just the BAU of actually managing running platforms and software. So you don't even feel the cost of uh, the amount of queries, prompts, and the questions that your users are asking across the organization. If as long as you have underneath hardware GPUs purchased for inferencing. So model training on cloud and inferencing, that's another way to look at it in terms of different stages, different infra used for your use case. This is another example, and probably the last one that I just want to give you. So this is a very big storage player uh, in the market, and they actually do a combination of on-premise, public cloud, and private cloud because they're actually a storage player, and for them it's logically important to distribute costs, redundancy, and hence virtualization and containerization is a big play on top of as an abstraction layer on top of this different infra, if you may call, to the extent that they're in extreme on the edge devices as well. So this virtualization containerization actually helps, and then they have a hybrid cloud management platform. So in the longer run, they're able to pass back the costs of on-prem as well, but they're still packaging it as a cloud offering. So it's a niche platform offering. So the question really comes back to that Tesla question that I asked in the start: do you need a wooden Cybertruck, or do you need an actual enterprise edition or like a real Cybertruck? And So it really matters, what you're looking for. If you're like a storage player, maybe it makes a lot of sense for you to do this. So yeah, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it really depends on what you're looking for. So your Docker in cloud could look like this, where we often see like people deploying a lot of instances of Docker images, and then they forget to clean up, and then it starts looking like this ship, and you're paying and billing for that size of the ship. But for all you needed was your like few Dockers that are running in production, and it can be transported over your car instead of the costs of ships. And that's a fundamental question of your business model. So if you really are validating a business, then it makes sense to kind of do this for validating 0 to 1 ideas in the cloud, or like training and building models in the cloud. But once you come back to the running costs of it, then it kind of makes sense to do it on-prem. So the idea of introducing a startup also doing on-prem was also 37 signals, David, right, was also to kind of get you the point across that it's not all that legacy anymore. It's like a modern way of architecting your own infra, depending on your own needs and depending on what kind of profit margins do you want to extract and what kind of cost programs do you want to run. So definitely, like markets are cyclic. So it was on premise, then cloud became interesting for the last 20 years, and then on premise is coming back again. So it's really important to keep that in mind. If like your CFO turns up to you as a CTO to say, hey, can we drive some of these costs down, I think you could definitely have a combination of on premise and cloud as the best way to kind of serve your own needs in the most interesting way. Yeah, that comes to the end of this uh, talk, and I hope you kind of enjoyed, and I was able to kind of drive a little bit of curiosity for you to kind of see and pick this up as your next step towards enabling your organizations on the technology side. Yeah, thank you so much.